The Sanmar Herald is 333 meters long, loaded, and she is nearly loaded, with 2 million barrels of oil heading from Ras Tanura to a refinery in Ningbo, and she weighs over 300,000 tons. She is as wide as a football field and as long as 3 of them. And at 10 minutes past 9 in the morning of April 18th, 2026, 2 Iranian gunboats are pointing heavy machine guns at her bridge. The boats are not large. They are 20-meter bogue hammers. Each one could fit inside the engine room of the ship they are threatening, with room left over. For the next 45 minutes, the 22 sailors on the Sanmar Herald, Indian and Filipino, none of whom chose to be here, will learn what every country on Earth has spent 50 years refusing to understand. The ship does not matter. The size does not matter. The cargo does not matter. What matters is that the boats are pointed at her, in a stretch of water 33 kilometers wide, and that somewhere in Tehran, a decision has been made. For 5 decades, no country has ever actually closed the Strait of Hormuz. One country has spent those same 5 decades practicing. This is the story of how a narrow channel of salt water between Iran and Oman became the most dangerous economic weapon in the world, and how the country on its northern shore spent half a century learning to hold it to the world's throat without ever quite pulling the trigger. We are going to follow the strait from a war in the 1980s that nearly dragged the United States into a second Vietnam. We are going to trace how Iran built a naval doctrine out of small boats, old mines, and hostages, a doctrine that no aircraft carrier has ever figured out how to defeat. We are going to walk through the pattern, the seizures, the mines, the drones, the bodies. And we are going to end in April 2026 on the bridge of a ship that should not have been there, at the moment the shadow war finally stopped being a shadow. The Strait of Hormuz is not long. End to end, it runs 167 kilometers, curving through the Persian Gulf like a narrow doorway. At its widest, it opens to 96 kilometers. At its narrowest, the passage between Oman's Musandam Peninsula and the Iranian island of Keshem, it squeezes to 33. Through that squeeze, every day passes 20 million barrels of oil, 20 million of the world's petroleum. Pipelines try to avoid it. None of them are enough. Saudi Arabia's east-west line can carry 5 million barrels in an emergency. The United Arab Emirates' Fujairah bypass can handle 2. The world consumes 100 million barrels a day. There is no backup. On the northern shore of this doorway sits Iran, with 900 kilometers of coastline inside the Gulf and control over the islands of Keshem, Hengam, and the Greater and Lesser Tums. On the southern shore sit Oman, the United Arab Emirates, and beyond them, Saudi Arabia. In the middle, at all times, is the American Fifth Fleet, permanently based in Bahrain, built around a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier and 30 escort ships. Every morning, tankers enter from the south, loaded with Kuwaiti, Saudi, Emirati, and Iraqi crude bound for India, China, Japan, and Europe. Every evening, they come back empty. In a normal year, nothing happens. The strait is boring. Nothing about 2026 is a normal year. The first time Iran tried to weaponize the Strait of Hormuz, it almost did not work. In March of 1984, 6 years into the war with Iraq, Saddam Hussein ordered his air force to attack Iran's main oil export facility at Karg Island. The attack was meant to suffocate Iran economically. Iran's response was not to defend Karg. Iran's response was to attack the ships carrying Iraqi oil out of Kuwait, tankers sailing for neutral customers, loaded in neutral ports, flying neutral flags. Iranian F-4 Phantoms strafed them anyway. Iraq answered by attacking Iranian tankers. Iran answered by attacking tankers from every Gulf state supporting Iraq. By 1986, more than 400 merchant ships had been hit. Crews were dying. Insurance premiums tripled, quadrupled, and then stopped being offered at all. The Kuwaitis, watching their tankers burn, asked the United States to take their ships. It was called Operation Earnest Will. The Americans repainted Kuwaiti tankers with American flags, renamed them, staffed them with American crews, and escorted them through the strait with United States Navy warships. It was the largest naval convoy operation since the Second World War. Iran watched, and Iran adapted. They could not fight the American Navy. They could not sink an American cruiser. What they could do, they had already learned by studying old Korean and Vietnamese tactics. They could hide in small boats, plant mines in shipping channels, and wait. On April 14, 1988, a frigate named the USS Samuel B. Roberts was escorting a convoy through the Central Gulf when her sonar crew spotted 3 dark circles in the water ahead. They tried to back out. They were already inside the field. The mine tore a 15-foot hole in her hull, flooded the engine room, lifted both gas turbines off their mounts, and nearly broke the ship in half. The crew fought fire and flooding for 5 hours. She did not sink. Nobody died. But something had been proven, and every navy in the world was watching. 4 days later, the United States executed Operation Praying Mantis, the largest American naval surface engagement since the Second World War. In one afternoon, the United States Navy sank an Iranian frigate, crippled another, destroyed 2 oil platforms, and sank at least 3 Iranian fast boats. It was a humiliation. And in Tehran, as the smoke cleared over the wreckage of the Sahand, Iran's senior naval officers made a decision that would define the next 40 years. They would never build a fleet to match the Americans. They would build something the Americans could not hit. That same summer, on July 3rd, something happened in the strait that Iran still commemorates every year. At 10:54 in the morning, Iran Air Flight 655 climbed through 14,000 feet on a scheduled commercial run between Bandar Abbas and Dubai. In its cabin were 66 children. The USS Vincennes, mistaking the Airbus for an Iranian F-14, fired 2 surface-to-air missiles. 290 people died. The United States never formally apologized. Reagan said he would not apologize for America. The captain of the Vincennes was awarded the Legion of Merit. In every Iranian city, the date, the 3rd of Tyr, is still marked. The strait remembers. And what Tehran was about to build in the silence of the decades that followed would not be understood by any Western intelligence service until it was already standing. From the ruins of Praying Mantis, Iran built 2 things simultaneously, over 3 decades, with almost no outside attention. The first was a fleet of very small, very fast boats. Not ships. Boats. Iranian engineers reverse-engineered Swedish Boghammer hulls and built them by the hundreds, 30 feet long, fiberglass, capable of 50 knots, armed with heavy machine guns, short-range anti-ship missiles, or explosives bolted to the bow. The IRGC Navy, distinct from the regular Iranian fleet, now operates several thousand of these craft. They launch in swarms. They hide in the thousands of inlets along the Iranian coast. They are almost impossible to sink faster than they can be built. The second thing Iran built was a mine industry. A single EM-52 contact mine, the Chinese design Iran licensed in the 90s, costs around $10,000. A Nimitz-class aircraft carrier costs $13 billion. Iran holds between 5,000 and 12,000 naval mines. To close the strait effectively, Iran needs 1,000 to 2,000 mines scattered across its shipping channels. The total cost is roughly the price of 2 luxury apartments in Manhattan. On top of this, Iran deploys anti-ship ballistic missiles along its coast, the Khalij Fars, the Fateh 313, and the Qatar, with ranges that cover every square inch of the strait. They have cruise missiles. They have shore-based radar. They have tunnel networks built into the cliffs where they store the launchers. The entire architecture was designed around a single idea. Closing the strait is not the goal. Making every shipping company on Earth believe Iran can close the strait is the goal. The difference between the two is worth, in any given month, about $100 billion in global energy markets. For 3 decades, Iran was the only country on Earth collecting it. For almost 30 years, the doctrine stayed dormant. The Iran-Iraq War ended in stalemate. The Soviet Union dissolved. The world moved on to other wars, other choke points, other problems. Then, in 2018, the Trump administration walked out of the nuclear deal President Obama had signed. Sanctions snapped back. Iran's oil exports, which had briefly climbed back to 2.5 million barrels a day, were strangled again. On June 13, 2019, 2 tankers in the Gulf of Oman, the Norwegian Front Altair and the Japanese Kokuka Courageous, caught fire within 25 minutes of each other. Hours later, grainy footage released by United States Central Command appeared to show Iranian personnel pulling an unexploded limpet mine off the Kokuka's hull. 5 weeks later, on July 19th, the British-flagged Stena Impero, 230 meters long, crewed by 23 seafarers from India, Russia, Latvia, and the Philippines, was rounding the Muzandam Peninsula when an Iranian helicopter appeared overhead. Small boats swarmed, men rappelled onto the deck. The ship's radar and communications were jammed. She was taken to Bandar Abbas and held there for 71 days. 18 of those 23 crew were Indian. None of them had ever seen Iran before. 2 months later, on September 14th, a coordinated attack hit the heart of Saudi Arabia's oil industry. 18 weaponized drones, 7 cruise missiles. The targets were the Abqaiq processing facility and the Kurais oil field. The attack lasted 17 minutes. It halved Saudi oil production for days. It took out 5% of global supply. Saudi Arabia blamed Iran. The United Nations investigated and concluded the weapons were of Iranian origin. The Houthis claimed responsibility, and nobody believed them. What mattered was not who fired the weapons. What mattered was the proof of concept. Stop here for a moment. For roughly the price of a used car per drone, someone had just put 5% of the world's oil offline from 300 miles away in under 20 minutes. Nobody had been able to stop them. Every insurance underwriter in London spent the next week rewriting their policies. What followed between 2021 and 2025 was something the shipping industry came to call the hostage economy. In April of 2023, 40 miles east of Fujairah, an Iranian Navy frigate intercepted a Marshall Islands flagged oil tanker named the Advantage Suite. It was carrying Kuwaiti crude for Chevron. Its destination was Houston. On board were 24 crew members, all Indian. The ship was intercepted. Iran's stated justification was that the ship had collided with an Iranian fishing vessel. There was no evidence this was true. It was taken to Iranian waters and held for months. The reason was not the collision. The reason was a ship called Suez Rajan. The Suez Rajan had been used 1 year earlier to covertly transport 980,000 barrels of Iranian crude in violation of American sanctions. In April of 2023, the United States seized the oil. Empire Navigation, the company that chartered the ship, pleaded guilty in a United States federal court. The oil was transferred to American custody. In Tehran, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, did not write a legal brief. They seized the Advantage Suite. Then, in January of 2024, they did something stranger. They renamed the Suez Rajan, the same ship the United States had taken oil from, to the St. Nicholas and sent her back into international trade. On the 11th of January, while she was carrying Iraqi crude through the Gulf of Oman, Iranian helicopters landed commandos on her deck and took her back. The crew, 18 Filipinos and 1 Greek, were held for months. This was the architecture of the hostage economy. A ship gets sanctioned, or seized, or involved in an American court case. Iran waits. Another ship, under another flag, crewed by men from countries Iran has no argument with, is grabbed in the Strait or the Gulf of Oman. The men become leverage. The Strait's economy keeps working, and every major shipping insurer in the world understands very clearly that the difference between a functional sea lane and a full-scale regional collapse is exactly 1 Iranian phone call. The total number of ships the IRGC seized between 2019 and 2025 is over 20. The combined days of captivity for their crews run into the thousands. Not one of those men worked for a government. Not one of them knew what their own ship was carrying. They were there because they were the cheapest available hostages in the world's most expensive waterway. And the hostages were the part of the doctrine the world was allowed to see. For years, analysts asked the same question. If Iran can close the strait, if the mines, the missiles, and the small boats are all real, why has Iran never actually done it? The answer has never been a secret. It has just been uncomfortable. Iran exports almost all of its own oil through the same waterway. 90% of that oil now moves to Chinese buyers who need the cargo flowing. The yuan that pays for it enters the Iranian economy through Hormuz. Close the strait, and Iran bleeds before Europe does. This is the restraint that has kept the weapon holstered for 50 years. Iran built it, knowing it could never quite pull the trigger. But the weapon was never the closure. The weapon was the threat of the closure. Every time Iran deploys a small boat, every time it fires a drone at a Saudi refinery, every time it takes a hostage, global oil prices spike between $3 and $15 a barrel within 24 hours. In a large market, that is billions of dollars. Some of that money flows back into Iran's economy through the black market oil trade. Some of it buys China discounts on sanctioned crude. All of it is leverage. The calculus for 40 years was simple. Use the strait as a pressure valve, but never crush the valve. Extract fear, never commit. What changed in 2026 was that the country holding the valve ran out of patience. On February 28, 2026, Israel and the United States launched a coordinated air campaign against Iran. It was the product of months of failed negotiations in Geneva and a short, inconclusive air war in the summer of 2025. The stated target was Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. The actual target, according to leaked documents, was regime change. On the second day of the strikes, a missile hit a compound outside the holy city of Mashhad, where Iran's supreme leader, 86 years old, in power since 1989, had been sheltering. Ali Khamenei did not survive. Iranian state media did not confirm it for 4 days. On March 2nd, with the supreme leader dead and the succession chaotic, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced that the Strait of Hormuz was closed. This was the weapon fully drawn for the first time in its 50-year existence. At first, nothing happened. A few ships turned back. Others waited at the southern entrance. On March 9th, Donald Trump announced from the White House that Iran's military had been destroyed and the strait was now reopened. It was not true. The strait was still closed. The ships still waited. For 5 weeks, the world's oil markets ran on fumes. Brent crude touched $140. American gasoline crossed $7 a gallon. Insurance rates for any vessel approaching the strait went from $80,000 per transit to over $2 million. Major shipping lines simply stopped routing vessels into the Gulf. On April 8th, a ceasefire was tentatively agreed in Islamabad. The strait was supposed to reopen. For 5 days, commercial traffic crept back through in nervous convoys. Then, on April 13th, the United States Navy, citing a second breach of the ceasefire by Iran, began a blockade of Iranian ports. Iran responded on April 17th by briefly reopening the strait as a sign of good faith during the Lebanon ceasefire. On April 18th, Iran closed it again. The Sanmar Herald was one of 23 vessels the United States Navy has since documented as being turned back, fired at, or prevented from transiting the strait between April 13th and the end of the month. Her captain was an Indian national with 31 years at sea. His name has not been released at the request of his family. He was 19 hours into a northbound transit when his automatic identification system registered 2 unknown craft approaching on the starboard beam at 47 knots. He had been through the strait 87 times in his career. He had never been approached before. At 9:10 in the morning, one gunboat fired a burst of heavy machine gun rounds across her bow. The second fired a second burst, this one aimed at the bridge wing. It missed by a meter and tore through the superstructure behind the navigation deck. The ship's chief engineer, a Filipino man in his 40s, later described the moment to an Indian maritime publication. The bridge was silent. The radar showed traffic stacking up behind them to the south, and no traffic at all ahead. The captain turned the wheel without speaking, put the engines into reverse, and began the slow 45-minute process of stopping 300,000 tons of ship inside the world's most dangerous waterway. He said they were not afraid of the gunboats. They were afraid that the gunboats were the small part. They were right to be afraid. 10 miles behind them, a second very large crude carrier, flagged to Liberia, took a projectile through its engine room. The crew was not harmed. The ship was left burning in the water. Further south, at the Fujairah anchorage, more than 100 tankers sat waiting. Some of them would wait for weeks. Some had been waiting since March. In London, the price of Brent crude jumped $15 in 11 minutes. By the end of April 2026, the architecture of global energy was being rewritten in public. China, which consumed half of all oil transiting the strait, was accelerating a pipeline project through Pakistan, financed not to save money, but to save access. India, which depended on the strait for 70% of its crude imports, authorized the biggest naval escort operation since independence. Japan paid Russian shipping companies a premium most Japanese firms had refused to pay for 4 years. The Fujairah bypass was running at maximum. The East-West pipeline in Saudi Arabia was at maximum. Together, they were moving 8 million barrels a day. The strait had been moving 20 million barrels a day. 12 million barrels were simply not reaching anyone. Refineries in Asia began to run short. Gasoline prices spiked in cities across Europe and North America. Inflation, which had been slowly cooling since 2024, reversed. Central banks warned of recession. And in every port between Fujairah and Mumbai, crews from ships that had tried to transit the strait began to come ashore, shaken, with stories that sounded impossibly specific. Bog Hamars that materialized out of nowhere. Ballistic missile tracks on the horizon. Radio calls in accented English that simply said, "Turn around." The weapon that had been pointed at the world's throat for half a century had finally been held to it. What Iran learned in those weeks was that the weapon could be used. What the world learned in those weeks was that no one had ever fully believed it until now. The hostage of the Strait of Hormuz was never a tanker. It was not a crew. It was not even a cargo. The hostage was time. For 46 years, every Western government, every shipping company, every oil ministry in Asia has woken up each morning and made a quiet bet that today would not be the day, that Iran would threaten and recede, that the ships would sail. For 46 years, the bet paid off. In April of 2026, it did not. On the Iranian coast, on a promontory just east of Bandar Abbas, there is a monument. It is a concrete slab, weathered, about 3 meters tall. It carries the names of 290 people who died on July 3, 1988, when the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655, 40 kilometers off that coast. At the bottom of the monument is a single sentence. The sea remembers. 38 years after that flight, on the same stretch of water, the sea is remembering something else. It is remembering every mine the Samuel B. Roberts struck, every tanker that burned, every crew that was taken, every hostage who learned, who had to learn, the hardest possible way, that the doorway to the world's oil is also, and has always been, a door that could be closed. Somewhere, right now, a captain is turning a wheel and pulling his ship back from the doorway. Somewhere, right now, an oil trader is watching a screen. Somewhere, right now, a foreign ministry is writing the sentence it hoped never to write. And somewhere on the Iranian coast, a young man in an IRGC uniform is looking through binoculars at a tanker he is not, for the moment, pointing a weapon at. He does not need to. the world already understands. If stories like this one, the slow, careful unmaking of the world's architecture, are the kind you want to keep following, subscribe. This channel exists to find the pressure points that history left buried. The next one is already on its way.